Good morning. I am so blessed to be here. Thank you for that prayer. That was a real prayer this morning. It was very much of a blessing. And for the music team, I really enjoyed that. I love that song. Thank you to the Cessna family for me being able to be here today. We emailed earlier. We weren't able to have dinner last night due to my flight being delayed, but we emailed back and forth and have in common of losing a parent when they were in their 50s. I also did, and just have to say that a lot of who I am today as a Christian is because of my parents and the legacy that they passed on to me and that I'm passing on to my children as well. So we have that in common. And I think, Coleman, are we good? For bringing me in here. We have been good friends studying couples and forgiveness together for a long time. It's a beautiful campus. I really enjoyed just being here this morning. Got to walk around, had breakfast at Solomon's porch. It's really, the blueberry pancakes, they're good. So really enjoyed that. I recommend it and look forward to spending some time. I think there'll be some time over lunch today as well for me to be able to talk with folks. I do have a strong passion for working with marriages and for encouraging healthy marriages everywhere that I go. That's really the mission that God's given me in the career part of my life. I'm blessed to have a healthy marriage myself, 18 years married together. My husband, I married my junior high sweetheart. So I'm very much of a dweller, we call them, someone who kind of finds that right person and stays put for a long time. How's this? Okay, that sounds great. All right. So this is a little bit of me and how I ended up getting interested in this, but I also got very interested in marriage because I was a college student, like many of you, and I was starting graduate school. How many of you are graduate students today in the audience? Okay, so almost everyone except the professors, right? And so you're graduate students, and you're trying to decide at this point in your life, what is it that you're going to specialize in? Are you going to be a generalist? Are you going to specialize? So I'm starting graduate school, and I'm trying to decide what to specialize in. And I'm working with Ev Worthington, and he does a wide variety of things. And one of the things that he did was he was just starting to work on his book on hope-focused couples counseling and in marriages. And I said, well, I've been married for a year. Seems like a good idea. I think I'll study marriages. And I was pretty young, and so that seemed like a good idea. And, it really was God's calling. God just kind of knew where to shape and grow me. And you look back in your life sometimes and go, wow, that all fit together so perfectly. One of the reasons I'm really passionate about it is because I think the previous generation might have said, war, what is it good for? So this is what the previous generation might have said, but I think this generation is saying a good bit of marriage. What is it good for? It's a bit of a problem, I think. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is it good for? What is marriage for, anyway? And I think that our society has lost sight of that, and that the church, that Christianity has something to offer the larger society by giving them another vision. So some of what I'm going to talk about is very psychological because I believe in special revelation and general revelation too, right? That God gives us general revelation. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is general revelation because God's allowed us to discover that. And I think that our society needs some of that too. It's also a good way in. So here's a fun one. Why get married? I mean, just find a woman that you hate, give her half of your money, and buy her a house and a car. And that would do it, right? And for a lot of people, that's their experience. But the problem is the little girl there sitting in the corner of my picture who reminds us that the end of marriages don't just hurt the people in them, which they do that, but they also hurt the next generation. But I have a couple of videos for you. I will just ask for your grace right up front. One of them is a beer commercial. I'm not promoting the buying of Bud Light today. It's just a perfect commercial to try to get my point across. So go ahead.
Shanti, come and meet your husband. 마찬가지.
So that might be women's perspective. Let's see what the men think.
Mom, how did you and Dad make your marriage work? Communication and understanding. I also did the little things that helped him spend more time with his friends, like writing the leaves, mow the lawn, build a solarium. There was a retaining wall, and change the oil every 5,000 kilometers. And remember, you can always say, I love you, with a kiss and a Bud Light.
Okay. So that kind of gets the point across. What everybody wants in their partner is somebody who will meet all their needs, right? So I can get, I can push my button and you can be the guy I really want, that Bollywood guy. That's really cool, right? Or you can, fix the retaining wall and do everything so that I don't have to do anything around the house. And everybody would kind of like that. But I'd like to introduce maybe marriage is good for something better than somebody to do things for you. Maybe there's something more. I'm not sure our society knows that yet. Next. Okay. I figure you should have breakfast in bed on your birthday. Can you reach the stove? Okay. So I have a couple more. Isn't he nice? He's a good husband right there. All right. Let's try the next one. Oh, I went by 2. Can you go back one? It's just a funny one. It's a 3-ring circus: marriage, engagement ring, wedding ring, and suffering. Oh, yeah, little jaded people out there making these things up. All right. It's got a delay. The next one makes you think a little bit about whether or not you should get married or seek a PhD, perhaps. And they kind of draw parallels between the two, such as it takes about 7 years for a PhD and about 7.5 years is the average length of a marriage. It begins with a proposal or a thesis proposal. It culminates with walking down an aisle in a ceremony with a big gown. It's foolish people either in love or without a job, getting a degree, bitter divorce, bitter remorse, starts with vows, starts with no house. So I just thought that was kind of funny for those of you in graduate school who are working on your graduate degree or thinking about going on to get a PhD. One of the things that inspired me as I was trying to think about what I wanted to say today was there's a new article that came out. I read about it in The Atlantic, but I went back and actually read the original article. And this is a writer out of the Netherlands. Her name is Jessica Olian. And the name of her article was, I Want to Be My Kid's Only Parent. Right? It's raised a lot of interest in society around the world today. It's kind of entered the blogosphere. And what she is communicating is that she had only one mom. It was just her and her mom in life. And she really thought that that was the ideal family situation. It's just a parent and a child or two. She really didn't see the point of having a marriage. She didn't really see that there was anything good about it, that there was any kind of purpose to it. It was just kind of a complication that a husband would bring to her life. And so I think that there are a lot of people like Jessica in the world who have kind of lost the point about what marriage is really all about. I'm going to talk a little bit for a while here on your prediction rates of what will predict divorce. How many of you are planning on to go into ministry as your full-time vocation into the future? So almost everybody. I am super thrilled to get a hold of you today. All right? This is like a psychologist's dream come true. And because Guess where people with marital problems go first? You. They don't come to me. I specialize in couples counseling. They almost all go to you first. Right? You're their minister first. In fact, if they're even loosely associated, like they go for Easter only, and you're going, "Who are you?" and they made an appointment, I have no idea who this person is. They'll go to their minister for marital problems. Right? Kind of makes sense. That's where they got married. People make that connection. This is a neat website called divorce360.com. They're trying to promote healthy marriages, and one of the things they have is a little divorce calculator based on demographics. So demographics aren't a great predictor as to who will divorce or not, but you can actually go in there and fill this out and find out what your chances are of getting divorced based on this information. It's kind of interesting. So we just kind of send you that way and see what you find. But I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that actually do predict divorce, because I'd like for you to be fully equipped, because I have an agenda for you today, particularly those going into ministry or into counseling as a field. And that is, I want you to be a missionary for healthy marriages. All right? So I grew up Christian Missionary Alliance, that's my background, and so I think very missionally about things quite often, you know how those things kind of layer into your mind. And so I think in terms of how can I get the message out in a way that people can hear. And what I care about today is that you take with you some information and increased motivation to promote healthy marriages in whatever position or place that God puts you, wherever that might be. So I'm going to talk to you about some divorce predictors. You can't predict divorce perfectly, but the researchers over the last 30 years are starting to get pretty good at it. Right? So there's been, about the last 30 years particularly, a concentrated effort to try to predict who will divorce and who won't, what the risk factors are anyway. So nobody's perfect. For me individually, I'm in pretty good shape. I've been married 18 years. I say I'm healthy. I'm probably going to stick it out. But how do you know? And you're going to do premarital counseling, and you're going to be working with people. What are the risk factors? So one of the risk factors is marrying under the age of 22, 21. Depends on the research. It's right around that age, though, there's a cliff. Right? And essentially, the thinking is that people that marry before that age, there's a reason that they're doing that. There's probably two major reasons that people do that. One is that they are escaping their parents, right? And so people who marry very young, right out of high school, early years, 19, 20 years old, are often running away from mom and dad, looking for somebody to be with, right? And so they will jump on board very quickly and marry. There also is that sense that many people who marry at that age don't vet each other very well, all right? So they kind of get married quickly. While we all probably have stories of people we know who met and married a month later and have been married for 50 years or something, that does happen. It is a risky thing to do. They could be a sociopath. You don't know. I mean, you really don't know when you haven't known someone very long. The other reason is an idea that people that marry young might be doing it because they have what we call anxious attachment style. Okay, so this is somebody, you probably know people like this in your life, who they get very nervous if they're not with somebody, right? It makes them so distressed not to have a partner, not to have somebody to lean on and depend on in life, that they would do anything to avoid that distress. It often started in early childhood because parents didn't meet certain needs, but here they are today. And so they will very quickly kind of jump in with somebody, and they'll ignore all kinds of warning signs. Substance abuse, domestic violence, all kinds of things are happening, and they're going, it'll be fine, we'll be together, it'll be fine. And so we really think it's not the age so much, although some of it probably is judgment related to age, but those kinds of factors. Education is a scary one. Again, this is probably other things making it happen, but people with only high school education have a 60% divorce rate, and people with completed a college degree drops to 30%. It's a big difference. There's a lot of concern in our society about this overall for people that are blue collar, that are low education, that they are not marrying very often, they are living together, they are hooking up, and that's it. And then the children in those, that mother particularly, are having the experience of multiple parents in and out, kind of exchanging throughout their childhood. That's very difficult on children. And so this is a pretty decent predictor is education. It probably is that people who have the support and the wherewithal in life to finish a college degree are a little different than people who don't have that kind of support and can't quite get that to happen in their life. That also causes problems in other areas of their life. Cohabitation, maybe. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later. People have studied cohabitation, and the results are mixed. But there's a new key finding by Scott Stanley at University of Denver that I think is going to help us all to think about this. Because about 75 to 80% of 20-somethings live together before marriage today. So that's your congregations, that's your community. Almost everybody is living together before marriage. Right? Think about that when you do your premarital counseling into the future. All right, so they've been trying to look for personality correlates with marital problems for a really, really long time. Right? They look at agreeableness, and they look at openness to new experiences, and they look at all kinds of things. And the only thing that's popped up repeatedly, as consistent anyway, is something called neuroticism. So being neurotic, you probably all kind of understand what that is. It's being a worrier, anxious, negative, kind of got a chip on their shoulder, maybe a little hostile, particularly the hostile neurotics. It's just kind of hard to be married to someone like that. So if you have yet to pick a partner in life, that would be one thing to look for, is maybe someone who's not that way. The less that way they are. If you do, you just know that may be a little bit of a burden to bear there. But one of the things that's important to know is once you're married, right, God's calling on your life is to be married, nothing else. And so then remember, it is a small contributor. So personality is a small contributor. I'm going to talk on the next slide about some things that are bigger contributors. Husband being unemployed, particularly chronically unemployed, has a huge prediction value for divorce. So if you're looking at your congregation into the future or your community into the future and you're trying to figure out who to minister to for issues of their marriage, look for people where the husband, particularly, mostly because husbands tend to be more breadwinners in our society still, that is chronically unemployed, goes in and out of jobs, back and forth. That's a high risk family right there. Just that one indicator will tell you. So it's something to think about as you think about future ministries that you might be involved in. And then just stress. A good example of stress is families where SIDS happens, where a child dies as a baby. And that's relatively random. People with lower SES and people who smoke, there's some predictors, but generally, this kind of happens to people. It's not something they make happen, right? Whereas other marital problems, people maybe make happen. They contribute to it. They didn't make the SIDS happen. And so this happens to them, but the divorce rate of couples who have a child die is incredibly high. It's around 80%. So again, if you're looking for people to minister to, watch out for them, but watch out for their marriages too. They're really going to struggle. They tend to grieve different ways and have a really hard time not blaming and being critical of each other. Okay. Here are predictors that are a little more contextual, and this is where the field is going. In fact, there's a brand new article just came out in American Psychologist just last month that's talking about contextual factors when looking at interventions in general, and we've been kind of studying this for a while. Criticism and contemptuous behaviors repeatedly are really good predictors. So if you got a couple coming in, and they sit down, and all they can do is complain about each other, right? And you're doing your counseling with them, and you can hardly stop them. You're going, wait, whoa. No, I need to stop right now. All right now, just hold up. And you're putting your hand up, and you're like, I'm going to have to stand up. I don't know what I'm going to do here. They just won't stop criticizing each other. This is not a good predictor. They're high risk, right? They're going to need a pretty strong intervention. Contemptuous behaviors is like criticism on steroids. This is essentially not just, I don't like what you did. It was bad. This is, you are bad. You are a defective, terrible person. Contempt ought to be outlawed in a marriage. Lack of joint activities is another predictor. So if you're seeing a couple and they're coming in for ministry, or you know them in your congregation and you realize they don't do anything together, it's one of the reasons why church can be a wonderful context to support marriages, is because it provides all these joint activities that a family can do together. There's not a lot of that in our society. Everybody kind of goes their own way. So church provides that for people so they can do joint activities, and to think in terms of how do we as a congregation, as the Christian church and a community, provide opportunities for people that are couples to come together and do something together, whether that's service, like you're talking about doing, raking leaves together, or whether that's ministry together directly. Those are very, very important for them. A weak attachment is what I had mentioned a little bit earlier. I talked about the anxious person who needs to be with somebody, but there's another weak attachment that's also concerning for us, and you want to kind of think through a lens as you think about couples that you're ministering to and who you want to target and maybe provide stronger interventions for, is the couple where one person seems to kind of not care. Like, I'm a rock, I'm an island, you don't really affect me. You can get upset and I don't respond to that, right? I don't like that. When couples come into my practice and I see them and I got one person who's really upset about it and the other person's going, see? You know, they don't care about the other person being upset or concerned, or their partner goes through a hard time and they keep their distance. They're avoidant, it's called. That's also a risk factor. A weak identity as a couple. Okay, so Jim Sells is a faculty member that I teach with, and he teaches in the counseling program. I teach primarily in the psychology program, the PsyD program on campus. Jim Sells is my counterpart, and he directs the counseling program. And he has this term that he uses about couples having an identity together. It's called we-ness, right? So you won't forget that one, right? We-ness. So W-E-N-E-S-S. And what we-ness is that sense of we are a couple. So we are the Ripleys. Right? We're the Ripley couple. Or you might think of your parents. Were they a we? Right? Was there a we-ness about them? And it was because it was the Smiths and the Smith family, and they knew who they were and what they were about and where they're going. A lot of couples that are at risk, there's not a sense that they're together. There's a sense of separateness in what they're doing. And particularly as they move further and further towards divorce, they get more and more towards something that's separate in life. And then escape options. Some of this is just interesting. We live in a culture that's quite wealthy. Even though we're in a recession, we're still quite wealthy. Most people can afford to house two separate households. And this is one of the reasons why cultures today that are more progressive and more wealthy have higher divorce rates, is because people can, right? And so you can kind of look at that. But there's even little things when you might be looking at couples that you minister to and like, well, if you were to separate, what would happen? And if they have an answer to that, I'd move in with my sister, and she's already offered to take care of the kids for us. And yeah, so they're getting support for separation. There's not a lot of barrier to staying in the relationship. It can be a problem if you have more like a domestic violence relationship where maybe they need to live apart for a while just for safety purposes. But that escape option is important. Interestingly enough, religion is not a predictor. We have studied religion and marriages for like 50 years. And just being a part of a religion is not helpful at all in marriage. Isn't that interesting? Well, that probably doesn't surprise you. You know lots of people that are religious and have terrible marriages, right? More than a few ministers have terrible marriages, right? So that's not what it is. But there's some really interesting new research coming out that it's not what you say you do, it's what you do that matters. So it's not saying I'm religious, it's doing religion as a family. So, prayer. University of Georgia and Florida State. Would you expect studies of prayer and marriage to come out of University of Georgia and Florida State? No. They are. They're doing really fabulous, large grant-funded research studies on prayer and finding, we already know the answer to this because we read our scriptures and we've been growing up in church and we know these kinds of things, but couples that pray together, pray for each other, do better. There's particular kinds of prayers, blessing prayers, self-conviction, not partner, God, convict my partner for all the mean things that he does to me right now. It's not particularly helpful, but you'll find that Frank Fincham has been doing this work, and Stephen Beach, and God bless them, good Christian men working in state colleges. So they've looked at prayer. Also, there's an interesting woman who studies marriage and religion, and she's not a Christian at all, and she has studied people seeing their marriage as sanctified. So what we do as a church, where we say to people, your marriage is holy, God is a part of it. You make your vows to God, not to each other. Right? This sanctification of marriage that we teach as a Christian community, that matters. That actually is protective of a marriage. Isn't that interesting? It makes for a healthier marriage. So when you teach that from a pulpit in the future as a minister, when you say that at a wedding ceremony, you are doing something that's healthy, that's promoting healthy marriages. It's gonna go. All right. So everyone in society right now is kind of weighing the pros and the cons. The pros and the cons of marriage. Should we have marriages? Should we not have marriages? I'm just going to quickly point us to my favorite scripture for marriage today. Marriages in Western cultures particularly are primarily about friendship. You can talk about that, debate that if you want to, but that's generally the basis of understanding of what a marriage is. It's not an economic agreement between parents that you might have in an arranged marriage. It's a friendship. So this scripture, I think, really works. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. If two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. And you probably know the cord of three strands is right after this. So I'd like to look a little bit at the context super fast. I'm not a theologian, I'm a psychologist, but I really find it interesting that right before this in Ecclesiastes, the writer is going on and on about how toil and work is meaningless. And right after it, they're going on and on about, the writer is going on and on about how advancement and improving yourself in life is meaningless. Right? Trying to do all of these things that we spend so much of our time and energy on. And right in the middle is this little passage about where two are together, they can protect each other, they can watch out for each other, they can keep warm. I think there's something really profound there. In the middle of a very difficult society where there are a lot of demands on us, maybe where two come together is important. And if people are called to be single, they need that second person to be with them if it's a best friend. I think there are two ways to ask the question about what marriage is for. One is a contractual value system, and the other is a covenantal value system. This is where I took theology and applied it to my psychology. In a covenantal relationship, this is a value system that primarily comes out of Eastern religious and non-modern cultures across thousands of years. So if you had talked to someone 500 years ago in England, they would be thinking covenantally about marriage. In this kind of marriage, people think about the collective needs. So what do we need as a family, or before children, what do we need as a couple? What are the needs of us collectively? As opposed to a contractual marriage that thinks, what do I need? What are my needs? And how can I get what I need out of my marriage or out of my partner? Okay, it's a very different way of thinking about the world. A second is that sacrifice for the good of the relationship is kind of like, no duh, but of course, in a covenantal relationship, as opposed to taking care of myself and then take care of the relationship is in a contractual relationship. There are a lot of people who promote that and say, hey, like it says on the airplane, put your own face mask on first and then take care of others. I'm not saying we're going to become the Borg here and give up everything, okay? It's not going to be the Borg. No one should go to that extreme. That's not what God is intending. But that it's okay to give up oneself. It's okay to sacrifice, that God honors that, and that there is a boomerang effect for that, and that health comes by looking out for the collective and not just looking out for the self. A covenantal marriage generally starts in making a vow, and again, in religious context, a vow to God, not to each other, and whereas it's a negotiated behavior or contract in a contractual relationship. I'm going to give 50%, you're going to give 50%, or I'm going to give sex and you're going to give money, whatever it is that they have contracted for. In a covenantal relationship, I find this very, very helpful in modern marriages, that everyone's going to do all they can. This was really, really brought home to me when my dad got cancer, and he was not able to do very much anymore, and my mom had to step up. And she had to do all the kinds of responsibilities that he had been doing, so they had kind of very stable, long-term, and they each kind of had their things that they were in charge of. And when he got cancer and was unable to do that, she had to step up. And it was a but of course moment. But of course, if you cannot, I will. I will do all I can for you and for our marriage. And that creates a stability in a marriage that lasts for a lifetime. And in fact, my research has actually shown that covenantal marriages are more stable and more happy. And in a contractual marriage, everyone just do their part. I'll do my part, but if you don't do your part, I'm not going to do my part. All right? I'm not going to do your part for you. I'm only going to do my part. That doesn't work out too well. There it goes. So I like to take it all home in 2 minutes, and that is to think about a vision for marriage, to utilize a lot of grace in our culture, and I want to get kind of an important point across on sliding versus deciding and grace in our culture. We're all going to see in my own practice and in your ministries, and a counseling ministry for those of you doing counseling, lots of couples who are cohabitating, who are doing all kinds of things that you think maybe not so holy. That's all normal. They live as part of their culture, right? Scott Stanley has this research he's done on sliding versus deciding. And he says there are two different ways that people enter into marriage. One of them is sliding. It's something like this. I like you, you like me, step. I love you, you love me, step. Let's enter into something like a honeymoon. You get what I'm trying to say, step. And you know what? This is great. Let's move in together, step. And oops, we had a baby, step. Well, we need to buy a house. Let's do it together because we can't afford the nice house without each other for the mortgage. And, well, I guess we better get married. We're doing all this, right? Final step, marriage. You all know people like this, right? They get married, but they've been living together for a long time. They have a kid already. They have a mortgage, all that. All right. This is a very different way of entering a relationship than deciding. Deciding is, I like you, you like me, step. I love you, you love me, step. Now, could I live with you for the rest of my life? Yes. Decide. All the way to the end. All right. Now I've decided. I'm married. And that kind of decision-making process is healthier psychologically, as well as more protective of the relationship itself, lower divorce rates, higher happiness rates, than the sliding step by step. But our society, so many young people are scared to death of marriage. They don't see the point of it. They don't understand it. They don't have a vision for it. So I want to encourage you to give them a vision. Give them a point. Give them an idea of what is it that they are going to take this giant leap for. And I'm going to kind of just move forward. We have a lot of great odds against marriages today. It's the me perspectives, the contractual perspectives, domestic violence issues. The pornography industry would be very happy to objectify women forever. Lots of people know people, and I think that sometimes we forget to bring all of the tradition of Christianity, the covenants of marriage, the purposes, the visions of marriage with us as we face Goliath, right? And that we need those 5 stones that God's given us and a strategy. Because a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. So that's really what I had to say today. I hope I motivated you to perhaps think more deeply about how you're going to minister to marriages in your community and in your church and in your counseling practice in the future, and to think in terms of psychology and Christianity have something to work towards together towards this. My website is hopecouples.com, by the way, if you want more stuff on what I do, and all of this is up there. So thank you very much.